on guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here to talk to you about Star Wars Shattered Empire. This has the cast of Return of the Jedi on the cover, and it says on the top, Journey to Star Wars, The Force Awakens. So I was foolish enough to think that this 4-issue miniseries would bridge the gap between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. Show some of the stuff that happened to the main characters from the original trilogy in the 30-something years in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. And this book does not do that. Instead, in this 4-issue book, I guess I should say who wrote and drew this thing. This is written by Greg Rucka, illustrated by Marco Checchetto and Angel Unzeta, with Emilio Lazo. And so in this 4-issue miniseries, we see Poe Dameron's mom, who we find out was a pilot on the second Death Star run, and the first issue is basically expanding on the events of the very end of Return of the Jedi, and then showing a little bit of the aftermath there. It's saying that even though the Emperor died, a lot of the Imperial generals are still carrying on with the war. The war didn't end with the end of Return of the Jedi. And so, issue 2, she goes on a mission with Han. Issue 3, she goes on a mission with Leia. And issue 4, she goes on a mission with Luke. And all of these missions are kind of done in one, very episodic stories. The thing with Luke, there are these trees from the original Jedi Temple at Coruscant that the Emperor had locked up somewhere, and Luke wants to rescue these tree branches. And so he needs a pilot to help get him there. In the Leia story, Leia goes to Naboo to try and ask the people of Naboo to join the rebellion. Now that the war is close to being over, Leia says that the people of Naboo can help strengthen the rebellion in forming a new government. And that's kind of cool. We get to see a little bit of how things are working on Naboo, since we really haven't seen much of it since Attack of the Clones. We briefly visited there in Revenge of the Sith, but we're getting to see some of the characters, some of the architecture, a lot of stuff that's familiar to us from the prequels, but in a post-Return of the Jedi setting. And there's a reference to Darth Maul that I thought was a little heavy-handed, but some people will probably like that. The thing is, I do not care about Poe Dameron's mom. She doesn't really have a whole lot here that makes me care about her or makes me know anything about her. All I know about her is she's a pilot for the rebellion. Throughout this miniseries, she's struggling with, should she stay with the rebellion because the war isn't close to being over with yet, or should she go with her husband back to her son? Her son is alive circa Return of the Jedi, and she says she's barely seen him, but she feels like she is abandoning the fight, and the fight is very important. And that's kind of all we get, and I feel like this would have been better if we had maybe a mirror arc for Poe Dameron in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. But I believe this came out like months before The Force Awakens, and so we really didn't know anything about Poe Dameron when this came out. But I was thinking, wouldn't it have been great if Poe Dameron had a similar arc to what his mom had? Like, he has a wife and a son somewhere, and he's struggling with, should I go be with them, or should I stay with the fight? If I stay with the fight, what am I fighting for? I've left my family, but if I stay with my family, there's a chance that they will die, and other families will die, and so there's no right answer here. And so I feel like if you had something there that would make this tie more in with Poe Dameron, then maybe this would have felt like a stronger story. Also, I can't get past the fact that this book, the cover essentially lied to me. I know there's a phrase, don't judge a book by its cover, but also when you're looking at an actual book, the cover is what makes or breaks you deciding if you are going to buy it. This shows the cast of Return of the Jedi, and it says Journey to The Force Awakens. So I was tricked into thinking this was going to be Luke setting up his Jedi Academy, Han and Leia getting married and their marriage falling apart. Basically an expansion of the things that were mentioned in the sequel trilogy. And again, if this came out before The Force Awakens, and I think it did, then they didn't want to spoil any of that stuff that would be told to us in The Force Awakens, in which case you probably shouldn't call this a Journey to The Force Awakens, since it's not. This is a small little prologue to Return of the Jedi that has nothing to do with The Force Awakens. So I don't think that I can really say anything nice about this miniseries. It had a promise on the cover, and then it broke that promise with the contents of the comic book. So I felt very let down reading this miniseries. But something nice I can say about this collection is that it has a Princess Leia issue written by Mark Waid and drawn by Terry and Rachel Dodson. And I really like that issue. And it advertises here, check out this Princess Leia graphic novel that's out now. And if anything, this book made me want to find that book and read it. It looked much more interesting, at least a little bit that I read here, than what we get in Shattered Empire. And then we also get the first issue of the 1970s Star Wars series, written by Roy Thomas and penciled by Howard Chaykin. And that's basically an adaptation of A New Hope up until the part where the Sand Person is shaking a stick at Luke, who has fallen on the ground. Back in the 70s, Marvel was doing a Star Wars series, adapting A New Hope, and then once they were finished adapting it, doing other stories that were, I guess, happening, and then they didn't know what was going to go on with Empire Strikes Back. And this kind of reminds me of whenever I reviewed those books adapting the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, and I said, what is the point of these books when you can just go and watch the movies? But this comic came out in the 1970s, where you had a limited amount of time to go and watch Star Wars in theaters, and then in the 70s, you didn't know when you were going to get a chance to see a movie again. Home releases, that wasn't a thing yet. This was still a few years from the time when you could go and buy a VHS tape of a movie and watch it as many times as you want until the VHS wears out. And so I can kind of understand why they would say, let's do a comic book adapting A New Hope. And also, this has scenes that weren't in the final movie. This shows Luke watching with his binoculars, watching the fight between the Star Destroyer and the Rebel ship that Princess Leia was on. He's watching that from the surface of Tatooine, and that is in a version of A New Hope that got cut. It was one of the earlier edits. They had that there, and it was a good 15-20 minutes before we see Luke in the actual movie, where we see him watching the fight. And that's here, probably because they were looking at an older script for their adaptation, and they didn't have access to the final product that showed up in theaters. So it is interesting getting to see their interpretation of the Star Wars script without having access to the final product that we all know nearly by heart today. This book, I have to be honest, I was really disappointed with it. I feel like it could have been pretty good. I understand that it came out before The Force Awakens, so they didn't want to spoil that movie. They had no idea what they were doing with Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker. I understand that, but I feel like when you have this cover and you're saying, look, this is going to show what these guys are doing in between those movies, technically that's true, but we don't really, this isn't a Luke story, it's not a Han story, it's not a Leia story. This is a Mama Dameron story, and I don't care about that. So unfortunately, I cannot recommend Shattered Empire. I was excited about this, and I was severely let down. So those are my thoughts on this book. I hope you guys liked this review, and I will see you guys in the future. In the meantime, have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.